Everybody, Bennett for the Bennett Podcast, and I'm sure you've already seen this kicking around on the internet. Games Workshop have revealed another new Warhammer quest. Now, this dropped on Monday. Fortunately, I was on holiday with the family, away from any internet at all, so I didn't get a chance to kind of share my excitement. But we've got something cool coming. Before we dive too far into this video, I just want to say this kind of stuff we're normally going to cover over on our fantasy channel, or if it's a sci-fi product, over on our sci-fi channel. But because we talked about Warhammer Quest the other month and you guys seem to be very excited by it, I couldn't resist putting it on the main channel. But fantasy content normally is going to be over there. Don't worry, it's still very much Blood Bowl over here. Alright, so a few months ago, they showed off the Warhammer Plus trailer. And in the trailer, there was snippets of Warhammer Quest. Original Warhammer Quest. This delicious... This is 8-bit Warhammer, right? This just absolutely smacks of 90s cartoons mornings playing this kind of game. This was like Hero Quest, but the next level up. And has map bits that we kind of reused for Dungeon Ball for decades. This game was epic. Now, in the grand scheme of game design and things, dungeon crawlers are rarely the most incredibly complex and challenging games, right? There are a couple that have done really well, but dungeon crawls are about just having nonsense fun and killing some monsters in dungeons, right? Whether you're playing Dungeon Saga, whether you're playing Warhammer Quest or Hero Quest, it's about rolling dice and murdering things and taking its money. So kind of this game here massively achieved that. So they showed this off on Warhammer TV and I got all excited because I thought, oh my goodness, they're going to redo this. There's going to be a new Warhammer Quest. And then it turned out that they were just having a playthrough of the original one to celebrate the 30th anniversary, which in itself was quite a cool thing. And I look at this and it fills me with kind of like excitement because I'm like, oh, I'd love to like film some not RPG sessions, but some sessions of like playing dungeon crawlers and stuff like that, because that's where we all kind of started. So it's a very cool thing. And that was it, right? That was it. And when they showed this off, it kind of, the hope of a new Warhammer Quest went away until this week when, let's bounce over to this, they unveiled this article on the Warhammer community. So evil lurks in the dark. There's something in the water and the whole of Ghyran is under threat. It's probably time to gather together a band of heroes, renegades and misfits and go on a quest. Warhammer Quest Dark Water. Grim adventures in the ruins of the mortal realms. Now, really interesting one because I saw the picture. We were on the ferry actually to the Isle of Wight and it came through on WhatsApp. Well, there was a snippet of internet and I thought, oh my god, we're going back to the old world. This is so smart. The old world is booming at the moment. Like, Games Workshop are absolutely keyed into it. People want to play in the old world. Let's bring back a Warhammer Quest. New Warhammer Quest in the old world. Actually, it's still set in Age of Sigmar. But look at the heroes. Look at the heroes. This is the most generic fantasy Games Workshop have done in a really long time, and I think that's so important. Dungeon crawlers are not, they're rarely their own game, right? Dungeon crawlers tend to be a board game that's self-contained, but tends to be a feeder into the miniature wargaming hobby. Like, it's your kind of touch into hobby fantasy. You play board games, I like board games. I've now played a Warhammer Quest, a Hero Quest, a Dungeon Saga, and I like the miniatures, I like the lore, I like where we're playing, I like the rules. How can I get more of this? And then you go on to a skirmish game, and then you just go into hobby poverty by playing a full-on war game like Warhammer or whatever. So they are a unique blend of fun play and the first hit is free. It's kind of how I would describe dungeon crawlers, which makes them kind of self-contained. There tends to be quite a good story, or at least a fun story to go along with it. And that in itself is its own charm. And I think it's a beautiful hybrid. They're a hybrid game between wargaming and board gaming. And that just sets them in a very special place for me. So they've dropped this. Now, there's not a lot of article to go with it. That's right, an all-new Warhammer Quest game set in the mortal realms of Warhammer Age of Sigmar. What perils await our group of intrepid adventurers within the ruins of the Jade Abbey? Okay, so that is it. That's everything that's been there. So I kind of thought, all right, that's fine. I'm in the land of no internet. I'm sure by the time I get back we'll have more information. But we don't. We've just been left hanging. What is the Jade Abbey? What's there? Who are these people? But what we can tell is what the villains are. So we've got Pestigors, we've got Nurgle warriors, you've got Nurgle demons in the background, which means the villains are going to be Nurgle, which makes sense because Ghyran is the land of life, I believe, in Age of Sigmar, and there's this constant battle between like the tree men and the wood elves and Nurgle, because Nurgle's all about growing disease and life and the cycle of death and mushrooms, basically. So there's this kind of, in the Age of Sigmar lore, there's this kind of to and fro between, yeah, basically your Sylvaneth and Nurgle. It's kind of constant. So the fact that the Jade Abbey is set in Ghyran makes a lot of sense. And then you've got Plague Bearers kicking around. It looks like, it doesn't look like, I think it's probably a Demon Prince. I don't think it's a Great Unclean One. The Great Unclean Ones tend not to wear a huge amount of armor. And these days, I think in the Age of Sigmar, well, they are big. Like the Great Unclean Ones got real great. And then you've got Pestigors, which are the Beastmen for Nurgle, and you've got the you've got the Nurgle warriors, which are called Blight Kings, I think, in Age of Sigmar speak. So this is not going to be zombies and skeletons and goblins. This is going to be basically diseased dudes, and you are kind of fighting a bit of pestilence, fighting to clean up an abbey or something like that, which I think's got a really cool vibe to it. Now the heroes, this is what I mean. This is the most generic I've seen from Games Workshop in a really long time. That is a dwarf. That's just a dwarf, right? That is a knight. That is just a knight. Then you've got another knight who is probably a paladin of some kind. And then you've got a mage. Undoubtedly a mage. You can kind of see they've got on the left hand side this mage here, which may or may not be an elf. Looks like a human. It looks like a Bretonian priestess, to be honest. You've got this sword, and the sword has got some magic water flaming around it, so we're assuming that's the mage. You've got, I'm assuming, a knight and a paladin hero and a dwarf there. And this dwarf is just a dwarf, which is so good for the Age of Sigmar, because the Age of Sigmar doesn't have dwarves anymore. You've got the Slayer guys that I cannot remember what they're called, the flamers of dwarfdom. I genuinely can't remember what they're called. They've got like magma droths and all this kind of stuff. The Slayer army, you've got the steampunk dwarves, and then now you've got chaos dwarves. But the standard dwarves have kind of gone. They were baked into the cities of Sigmar, which was kind of like an amalgamation of Etonia and Empire, with a little bit of War Machine chucked in there, which is probably the closest thing you get to an entry point into Sigmar, right? When it comes to Sigmar, the bog standard dude is basically the Space Marine in the way of the Sigmar guys. So it's kind of like, all right, hard to buy into in some cases for Age of Sigmar. So the fact that we've gone back here and we've got knights and humans and dwarves doing dwarf things and some kind of mage doing a mage thing, that makes it so accessible. And we've already said dungeon crawlers are about accessibility. They are the gateway into hobby. It's a board game with some cool models. Where do I get more models? What's the expansion? And then you kind of got the flip-flop, which is great models. How do I use these in Age of Sigmar? Because if I can get an army of knights that look like that, I might play Age of Sigmar. Like, if I can get an army I can relate to in Age of Sigmar, I could buy in. Now, I've been reading a load of Mantic lore and Mantic books recently, and their humans are awesome. So I'm like, holy knights, sign me up. This could be this. This could be that for Age of Sigmar. So we've got a dwarf, we've got a wizard, we've got two knights, probably one's a paladin or something like that. And it looks like it's going to be some dungeon crawling adventures in a diseased place. Now, when it comes to Warhammer Quest, it's a series of games from Games Workshop that started in 1995 with the one we've already looked at. They did Blackstone Fortress, which was a wicked hex-based game that was quite interesting to play out and had some great models like the Amble. And I liked this. They did a really good job with some creative game design and just exploring 40k, which I think is what Age of Sigmar could do with doing a bit, is exploring the lore and how would I be in the Age of Sigmar? Probably just a normal Nurgle, but you know, if I was going to be a knight, if I was going to be a human knight, how would that look? And that's something that they nearly got to with the Cursed City. Now, the Cursed City was the Cursed City indeed, and I think this came out in maybe 2020 or 2021. We were very excited about it. Then it kind of was released, and then they pretended it wasn't released because they ran out of stock, and Cursed City's got its own little story, shall we say, when it comes to the games of Warhammer and Games Workshop. But this was, I think, the last edition, the last sort of game that was under the Warhammer Quest license, the Warhammer Quest name. And I love everything that I saw in this picture. Incredible model design, dungeon tiles, and stuff to track. You've got bad guys to kill, you've got rooms to explore, and you've got what awfully looks like special powers and item cards and things just to enjoy from a gameplay point of view. Cursed City was incredible for the models. The models were fantastic, the set was beautifully done, but because it kind of died, it got forgotten. I've got a copy somewhere, but because the game kind of died, I was really excited to play it through, and it just kind of went away. So I am, for one, very excited, and I hope we see something like this back. And I am excited to see some knights and some demon dudes to be chopped up. So yes, Games Workshop, absolutely positively sign me up, and let me know if you think we should play through this on the channel when it drops out, because I am sorely tempted. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back soon with more Warhammer content. Happy blocking.